7 Chinese habits that shock foreigners. There is a moment nearly every foreigner in China describes the same way. It's usually the first week. Maybe a restaurant, maybe a taxi, maybe a lift in an office building. Something small happens. Something so ordinary to the people around them that nobody else even notices it. And the visitor is left thinking, wait, what just happened? Maybe it's the waiter who looked almost offended when they tried to leave a tip. Maybe it's the elevator panel that jumps straight from the 3rd floor to the 5th, as if the 4th doesn't exist. Maybe it's the woman at the next table, halfway through a heat wave, sipping from a mug of unmistakably boiling water. None of it is an accident. Every one of these moments is the visible edge of a habit that runs deep, sometimes thousands of years deep, into Chinese daily life. And once you understand the reason behind each one, they stop looking strange and start looking quietly logical. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why these 7 things happen every single day across a country of over 1 billion people, whether or not a single foreigner is around to notice. Let's go through all 7, in the order a visitor is most likely to run into them. Habit 1. Drinking hot water instead of ice water. Here's the moment that catches almost every visitor off guard first. Even on a scorching summer day, many Chinese people choose hot water. Not lukewarm, hot, straight from a thermos, sipped slowly while the visitor across the table works through a glass of ice. This isn't a preference picked up last week. By the Zhou dynasty, over 2,000 years ago, traditional Chinese medicine had built an entire theory around it. Warm water was believed to expel excess cold and dampness from the body, while cold water was thought to do the opposite. But the habit that made it universal wasn't ancient medicine. It was a cholera outbreak. In 1862, an epidemic swept through northern China. The South, largely spared, was widely believed to owe this to one thing. Southerners drank their water boiled. From that point on, hot water became a life or death habit, one that government health campaigns in the 1930s and again the 1950s actively promoted nationwide. Tap water in much of China still isn't safe straight from the faucet, so boiling is purification as much as tradition, which is why hot water dispensers still sit in nearly every home, office, and train station today. To a foreigner, it looks like discomfort. To the people doing it, it's thousands of years of the same quiet logic. Drink it hot, and you're safe. But if hot water is the habit visitors notice first, the next one is the habit they can't avoid using. Because in most of China, it's the only way to pay. Habit 2. Paying with QR codes everywhere. Pull out cash in a Chinese city today, and you might get a few confused looks. From street vendors to 5-star hotel counters, the transaction looks the same everywhere. A small square code appears, someone scans it, and payment is done in about 2 seconds. No card, no signature, sometimes not even a word spoken. The scale is hard to overstate. Roughly 970 million people in China use mobile payments, and among adults under 35, adoption is close to universal. Over 90% of all mobile transactions now happen through a QR code, whether at a giant mall or a single street cart. Here's the part that surprises most visitors. QR codes weren't even invented in China. They were developed in Japan in the 1990s for tracking car parts in factories, and barely used outside logistics for 2 decades. Then, starting around 2011, 2 Chinese platforms built entire payment systems on top of that humble black and white square. And China essentially skipped the credit card era altogether, moving straight from cash to phone. This can feel disorienting fast for visitors. A wallet full of cash suddenly useless in front of a vendor who's genuinely never seen anyone pay any other way. But there is a fix. Both major payment apps now let foreign Visa and MasterCard accounts link directly, so the same 2-second scan works for tourists too. That covers how people pay for a meal. What happens once the food arrives is its own kind of culture shock. Habit 3. Sharing every dish. In most Western restaurants, a meal means one plate per person, belonging to whoever ordered it. In China, that premise flips. Order a table of food, and what arrives is a collection of shared dishes set in the middle, often on a rotating glass tray, with everyone reaching in with their own chopsticks or a shared serving spoon to take a little of everything. To a first-time visitor, this can feel chaotic. Whose dish is whose? The answer? Nobody's. And everybody's. The table isn't built around individual ownership of food. It's built around a different idea, that a meal is something a group experiences together, not something eaten separately while sitting near each other. This traces back to Confucian values around collective harmony, values that shapes nearly every layer of Chinese social life, including how food is served. 4 dishes for 4 people isn't 4 meals. It's one meal made of 4 parts, shared by everyone at once. Ordering only for yourself can even come across as a small refusal to participate. For a foreigner used to guarding their own plate, the adjustment takes a meal or 2. But the logic holds up. More variety, more flavors tried, and a meal that's fundamentally social rather than solitary. Eating together is one thing. What happens before and after those meals, in massive public numbers, is where things get even more visible. Habit 4. Morning Tai Chi and public square dancing. Walk through almost any Chinese city park before 7 a.m. or through a public square after dinner, and you'll find the same scene. Sometimes dozens, sometimes hundreds of people moving through slow, synchronized Tai Chi at sunrise, or dancing in unison to music blasting from a speaker at dusk. This isn't a scheduled class. It's simply what a huge number of Chinese people, especially those in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, choose to do with their free hour, in public, together. Estimates suggest public square dancing alone involves somewhere around 100 million participants nationwide, one of the largest informal exercise movements on Earth. Tai Chi goes back centuries, developed originally as a martial art, before evolving into the slow, meditative form visitors recognize today. Square dancing traces to the 1940s, to folk yanga dances performed in wartime Yan'an, revived in the 1980s as cassette players became affordable, before exploding into the nationwide movement it is today. For a foreigner, the scale is disorienting. An entire square transformed into a synchronized dance floor with nobody performing because everybody is the audience. But underneath the spectacle is something simple. Exercise in China is rarely private. It's public, it's social, and it happens outside, in view of the whole neighborhood. That same instinct toward movement and community shows up in something visitors see people carrying everywhere they go. Habit 5. Carrying tea everywhere. Look closely at what's inside that insulated bottle nearly every Chinese commuter seems to carry, on the subway, at the office desk, and it's rarely just water. Often it's tea, leaves still floating loose inside, refilled with hot water throughout the day, rather than brewed once. This connects directly to hot water culture, but became its own ritual. Tea drinking in China stretches back over 1,000 years, refined during the Tang and Song dynasties into an art form with its own tools and etiquette. Carrying a flask all day is the modern, portable version of a habit that never really stopped. There's a practical layer, too. Because the leaves stay in the bottle, one flask can produce tea for hours, each refill slightly lighter than the last. Less like packing a drink, and more like carrying a slow-release ritual. For a visitor used to grabbing a coffee and leaving the cup behind, an adult nursing the same flask from breakfast to dinner looks almost quaint. To the people doing it, it's simply what's always been in the bottle. Some habits on this list are about what people do. The next 2 are about what people carefully avoid. Habit 6. Avoiding the number 4. Step into a lift in many Chinese buildings and check the panel. 3rd floor. 5th floor. No 4th floor button anywhere. Sometimes not the 14th or 24th either. The reason is linguistic. In Mandarin, the word for, si, sounds almost identical to the word for death, si. The words aren't technically the same, they carry different tones. But spoken quickly, the resemblance is close enough that an entire cultural habit grew up around avoiding the number. This goes beyond elevators. Apartments on floors ending in 4 have historically rented and sold for less. Hospitals frequently skip 4th-floor room numbers. Phone numbers and license plates with multiple 4s are sometimes considered unlucky enough that people pay extra to avoid them. Gift giving follows the same logic. Giving 4 of anything is generally avoided, the way giving 13 might raise an eyebrow in parts of the West. For a foreigner, a missing 4th floor can look like an oversight. It's neither. It's a superstition built entirely out of how one syllable sounds, taken seriously enough to reshape buildings across an entire country. And it isn't only numbers that carry unspoken rules. Money itself, and how it's handled after a service is done, comes with its own quiet etiquette. The last habit on this list surprises almost every first-time visitor, and many accidentally get it wrong. Habit 7. No tipping. For a lot of foreigners, this habit flips everything they know about restaurants and hotels upside down. In China, tipping isn't just uncommon, it can actively make the other person uncomfortable. Try to leave extra cash on a table, and don't be surprised if a server chases you down the street to hand it back. It's not that the gesture is unwelcome, it's that it doesn't compute. The underlying belief runs deep. Good service is a basic responsibility, not something that needs a financial nudge. A server doing their job well isn't going above and beyond, they're simply doing what they're already paid a normal wage to do. There's history behind this too. Some scholars point to collectivist values that took hold through much of the 20th century, where paying one person individually, on top of an agreed price, sat uneasily against a broader emphasis on shared effort over individual reward. Others argue it's simpler. Most meals in China historically happened in small, informal settings, where the concept of a discretionary service charge never had a reason to take root. Either way, the result is the same today. A tip doesn't read as generosity to most service workers in China. It reads as confusion, sometimes as faint embarrassment, as if the giver is suggesting the normal wage wasn't enough. For a visitor raised in a tipping culture, the instinct to leave something extra takes real effort to unlearn. 7 habits, 1 country. Let's bring it all together, because each of these, on its own, might look like a quirky footnote. Together, they form something bigger. Hot water instead of ice, because history taught an entire country that boiled water keeps you alive. QR codes instead of cash, because China skipped a whole era of payment technology. Shared dishes instead of individual plates, because a meal was never meant to be eaten alone. Tai Chi and square dancing in public, because exercise here has always been social. Tea carried all day, because a ritual habit never really needed to end. No 4th floor, because of how a single word happens to sound. And no tip left behind, because good service was never supposed to come with a price tag attached. None of these are random. Every one traces back centuries, or in some cases just decades, to a reason that made complete sense at the time, and somehow still does today. The next time you find yourself somewhere unfamiliar, watching a habit that looks strange from the outside, it might be worth pausing before deciding it's odd. Chances are, somebody could explain exactly why it exists, if you just took a moment to ask. This has been a look into the history and logic behind 7 everyday Chinese habits. Not a judgment, a perspective. If this changed the way you think about the small things you notice while traveling, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And if you visited China tomorrow, which of these habits would be the hardest for you to get used to? Let us know in the comments. We'll see you in the next one.